of the lands and waterways in which we are on. So we'd like to acknowledge the First Peoples, especially today we are on Camaragal country. And we'd like to pay our respects to the elders, post current and future, for their ongoing custodianship and knowledge. All right, so today we have our mid-candidature review by Danling Huang. And I'd like to introduce her mid-candidature review panel, which is being chaired by Associate Professor Jessie Gale in person here, as well as Dr. Geet Janjali Bhaskara. And we would also like to welcome a special guest, Associate Professor David Morris, from all the way from the United States at St. Mary's College of Maryland. And it is pretty late, I think, over there on the East Coast. So we'd like to welcome David as well as part of the panel. And Danling is being supervised by Professor John Marshall Reed as Principal Supervisor, and co-supervisors is Professor Herb Marsh, Associate Professor Teresa Dickey, and Dr. Harin Zhang. So I am going to share the screen for presentations and get this going. So, with me.
Thanks, Ricky, and thanks everyone for being here and online for my mid-candidature review. It's such a big group today, and it's such an honor for me. So I'm going to get started. As you can see here, the title of my project is Developing Teacher Self-Efficacy, Identifying its Causal Sources and Improving Educational Outcomes. And I'm going to start with an overview of my project, and then report on my progress so far, and then identify the next steps. So hopefully in the next 20 minutes or so, you'll get a more comprehensive view of what I've done, where I am, and where I'm heading next. And some of you may wonder, why did I choose to study teacher self-efficacy in the first place? Well, generally, I'm interested in motivation for teaching and learning, and it looked like everything I read, not like I read much, but there's teacher self-efficacy everywhere. So I was like, it must be such an important construct. It's everywhere. It's related to so many things. And I also wondered if like so many people are researching teacher self-efficacy, is it well researched? Well, let's look more into it. So since the year 1977, when Bandura introduced self-efficacy, till 2023, when I started my PhD, teacher self-efficacy has been researched and developed for decades. And there are a lot of other similar constructs in the literature, including like collective teacher efficacy, personal teaching efficacy, and even outcome expectancy, etc. So it is not really easy to answer or to say what teacher self-efficacy is exactly. But here in my project, I'm defining teacher self-efficacy as a teacher's confidence in his or her own capabilities to successfully perform teaching tasks, especially the difficult ones, in any given situation. And I think we can all agree that teaching is a challenging job, and there are a lot of unpredictable situations when it comes to teaching. And here's a true story. One of my teachers used to teach in an American high school, and one day a girl in his class came up to him after the class, and she said, "Mr. Heller, my mom left my dad for another woman." And he didn't expect that. So he froze and didn't know how to respond. And if I were in his situation, I wouldn't know what to say either, except I'm sorry and good for your mom. Yeah, so teacher self-efficacy seems to be really important to situations like this. And it is teachers' self-perceived confidence in future capabilities. And it's not always equal to your actual competence, because you may overestimate or underestimate your self-efficacy. So now that we've got the definition, if I present you these two groups of items, can you tell me which group reflects teacher self-efficacy better? The purple one or the blue one? Yes, thank you. It is the purple one. So as we can see here, teacher self-efficacy is better measured using I am confident that, I believe I can, or I can't, instead of using simple future tense like I will, or measuring actual competence like I'm able to, or I know. Now we know what it is. And when delving deeper into the literature, it is not difficult to notice that the literature of teacher self-efficacy has relied predominantly on correlational evidence. But we also know that correlation doesn't equal causation. As we can see in this cute analogy here, ice cream and sunburn may correlate with each other, but they are not caused by each other. Instead, they are both caused by the hot, sunny weather, which we don't have today, I don't think. So even though teacher self-efficacy correlates with so many positive variables or outcomes, what I really want to know is, do changes in teacher self-efficacy cause changes in those educational outcomes? And also, do changes in the sources of teacher self-efficacy cause changes in teacher self-efficacy? So this suggests that teacher self-efficacy is not well researched. It is a mission incomplete, which I'm about to complete. So there are problems remaining to be solved in the literature. And here in my project, I focus on 3 problems. The first, we know that teacher self-efficacy correlates with so many educational outcomes, but do these changes or increases in teacher self-efficacy cause the changes in those outcomes? And the second is, if changes in teacher self-efficacy cause those important outcomes, and what causes changes in teacher self-efficacy? Can we find the causal sources of teacher self-efficacy? Once we can they be integrated into an existing intervention to produce better outcomes? And to solve these 3 problems, I have 3 studies. The first study aims to demonstrate teacher self-efficacy's causal predictive power on educational outcomes. The second study aims to identify causal sources of changes in teacher self-efficacy. And the third study aims to integrate those causal sources to produce better outcomes. And you might have noticed there's causal in each study. This shows how obsessed me and my supervisors are with causal relations. And my project consists of 5 chapters in total. In this review, I'm focusing on chapters 2 and 3, which are the literature review and study 1, and they have been completed. Study 2 and 3 are under process, but I'm still going to present where I am in those studies today. Before I do that, I do need to apologize to my lovely panel, because you might have read some mismatching details in my written document. So hopefully this presentation will help clarify things better. So I'm basing my research on the social cognitive theory by Bandura. It provides the theoretical framework for the concept of self-efficacy and hence teacher self-efficacy. And the theory suggests that self-efficacy is the most important personal factor in human agency that interplays with the environment and behavior. So in teachers' case, teacher self-efficacy interplays with the educational context and teacher behavior. And the theory's founder, Professor Albert Bandura, who's no longer with us, may he rest in peace, he had a quote that I wanted to share with you. This quote demonstrates how important he thinks self-efficacy is. He says, in order to succeed, people need a sense of self-efficacy to struggle with resilience, to meet the inevitable obstacles and inequities in life. So he also proposed some sources of teacher self-efficacy to help people develop that important sense of self-efficacy. And these sources include mastery experience, vicarious experience, verbal persuasion, and physiological and emotional states. Now we've got the theory. I'm going to take you through each study. And first of all, why is study 1 necessary? Demonstrating the predictive power of teacher self-efficacy. Because we already know that it correlates with so many educational outcomes. And there are a lot of teacher interventions measuring the changes of teacher self-efficacy as one of the indicators of their teaching, of their effectiveness. And a recent meta-analysis by Teresa and colleagues also demonstrate that interventions can increase teacher self-efficacy effectively. So these interventions, they mostly focus on developing teacher-like skills or knowledge. But then after the intervention, teachers' self-efficacy often goes up. So this brings the question, do the increases in teacher self-efficacy have a causal impact on those outcomes that it correlates with? Or are the increases of teacher self-efficacy just a byproduct of those teacher interventions? Okay. And since there are so many teacher interventions developing teacher skills, I can only pick one. And unsurprisingly, I picked autonomy supportive teaching, of course. And it is because I'm such a big advocate of autonomy supportive teaching, even though I'm not good at it at all. My supervisors are. And also, previous autonomy supportive teaching interventions have demonstrated that they can effectively increase teacher self-efficacy. So my study 1 is going to answer 2 research questions based on that. First, I asked what increases teacher self-efficacy following the intervention. And does the increase in teacher self-efficacy after the intervention lead to the improvements in the educational outcomes? And here in this study, I focus on 2 key outcomes, which are job satisfaction and student achievements. So here's my hypothesized model. The colored path are the hypothesized path, but there are also other paths for statistical controls and correlations that are not shown here, just for better clarity. And I want to draw your attention to these 3 paths. I care most about whether the intervention will increase teacher self-efficacy and whether the increases at time 2 teacher self-efficacy lead to the increases in time 3 outcomes, okay? And here's the method for the study 1, for the first study. The participants were 91 PE teachers from South Korea, and there are 4 measures for 4 different variables. The used scales are all well developed and validated. And a quick note that student achievement was measured using the class average or objective student scores, okay? And most importantly, this study used a randomized control trial across a whole school year. There are 3 time waves of data collection, and the intervention happened between time 1 and time 2. For data analysis, I used structural equation modeling at the teacher level in M+, and FIMO was used to treat missing data. And here are some key findings. First, the intervention worked well. It increased both autonomy supportive teaching and teacher self-efficacy. And time 2 teacher self-efficacy was increased by the intervention. And most importantly, the increases in time 2 teacher self-efficacy did improve the time 3 outcomes as expected. And here's the model fit. And just a quick note that This hypothesized model also includes mediation effects, and mediation effects were also tested. And the results are time to teacher self-efficacy also significantly mediated the intervention effect on time 3 outcomes. So from the findings, we can see that enhanced teacher self-efficacy improved educational outcomes. The teacher participated in the intervention and they learned the skills for autonomy supportive teaching, and then their confidence went up. And then they experienced greater job satisfaction and teacher and student performance. There are many implications from this study, and here I'm focusing on 2. The first is that this study has demonstrated teacher self-efficacy is not just a byproduct of teacher interventions. Enhancing teacher self-efficacy is actually crucial to drive the improvements in educational outcomes. So future teacher interventions might want to focus more on enhancing teacher self-efficacy. And second, both autonomy supportive teaching intervention and autonomy supportive teaching practice have increased teacher self-efficacy. This suggests that they might act as 2 causal sources of the increases in teacher self-efficacy. So it provides some evidence for my study too. And there are also some limitations in this study, which lead to the future directions. The sample size in this study was relatively small, so larger sample sizes are needed for more robust modeling. And this study focused on or included PE teachers, so it needs to be replicated in different subjects and different contexts. And lastly, this study didn't use a teacher self-efficacy scale specifically designed for autonomy supportive teaching. So it's worth developing a new scale for for autonomy supportive teaching. And now I'm going to talk briefly about the other 2 studies which are under progress. So study 2, why is it necessary? And if study 1 has demonstrated that enhancing teacher self-efficacy is crucial, there are a lot of proposed sources in the literature for teacher self-efficacy. However, there's a lack of statistical evidence in the literature, especially like methodological limitations for causal links, as reviewed by David and colleagues who's on my panel. So why don't we do a meta-analysis to see if we can find the causal sources based on stronger statistical evidence? So I'm doing a critical review and a meta-analysis of causal antecedents of changes in teacher self-efficacy. And it's going to answer 3 questions. First, are Bandura's 4 hypothesized sources of self-efficacy or causal antecedents of changes in teacher self-efficacy? And are there other causal sources outside of the 4 hypothesized sources? And to what extent are they moderated by gender, grade level, etc.? Right now, I'm in the middle of doing data extraction of this meta-analysis, but we've done the searches and screening. The searches were based on 3 main concepts of teacher self-efficacy, study design, and settings. These are not the exact search terms I used in the searches because there's no space for all that. And this meta-analysis might be a bit different from regular meta-analysis because we focus on causal links only. So we only included interventions, experiments, and longitudinal studies. And here's the prisma. We started with over 8,000 studies from 5 databases. And after removing duplicates, we screened over 4,500 studies. In the end, 137 studies were included in the extraction. And before we started the extraction, my professor and I spent a lot of time categorizing those antecedents in the 137 studies, and we found 19 categories in the literature of the included studies, and that's way more than Bandura's 4 sources, even though they are all in there. Till this point, we have extracted like over 300 effect sizes here, and you can see the proportions of each antecedent. So I can confidently say there are definitely other causal sources outside of Bandura's sources, which I think aligns with David's call of reconceptualizing the sources of teacher self-efficacy. And lastly, study 3, why is it necessary? I mean, study 1 has demonstrated that enhancing teacher self-efficacy is important, and we should be able to find some causal sources in the meta-analysis. And it would be interesting to see whether we can integrate those sources and then produce better outcomes. And I plan to do an intervention and experiment to integrate those causal sources. And the protocol has been developed. Ethics has been approved, thank God. And the survey has been built in Qualtrics. So here are my next steps. I'm going to focus on the data extraction and the write-up of study 2 and 3, and also data collection of study 3 will be under progress soon. And to make it more visual, this is the timeline. As you can see, this is where we are, the line in the middle, and the cases on the left have been completed. And from this point on, I will be working on the journal submission of study 1 and the rest of study 2, and another year for study 3, and etc. So if listening to this is too much, imagine doing it. But I'm lucky enough to have the most amazing supervisors, colleagues, and partner to support me through all this. And I'm really grateful for that. And now I'm ready, or almost ready, for any questions, suggestions, and comments you may have, including Herb's. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danling. I'd like to hand over to Jesse as chair.
Well done, Danling. I think the difficult framework and the problem solved and the studies are representative presentation.
Thank you.
Before we open up to floor for general discussion, the panel member will ask some questions first before we start with Danling. Could you tell us a little bit about study 3? Because you mentioned that study 3 could be an experimental study or intervention study, or could you tell me about that? Study 3 as a plan?
Yeah. So ideally, I wanted to do an intervention or in schools to like have an experimental group as the traditional autonomy supportive teaching intervention, and another experimental group that's called combined autonomy supportive teaching and teacher self-efficacy in there, which will integrate the significant sources of teacher self-efficacy in the second group, and another control group. So there will be 3 condition groups in the intervention or experiment, and I will compare the effects or the results of the second group, which is the integrated group, to the original or the traditional autonomy supportive teaching intervention group, to see if it can if the integration of the sources can produce better outcomes, better than the traditional autonomy supportive teaching intervention. That's the idea for the intervention. But it is difficult to like have the randomized control trial in school context. So the backup plan will be the experiment, like lab experiments, and where we can have the participants in different groups and manipulating different sources in each group and compare the results of different groups. If that makes sense?
Yeah, but if there's the original plan and the backup plan, the sample will be different, right?
Yeah,
So the original plan is like the primary school or secondary school student.
yeah. Teachers?
Okay, so it's the teachers, right?
Yeah.
So once you.
Yes, yeah, and each planner group, the sample is from teacher as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the intervention or experiment, the participants will be teachers. Yeah.
Just something that's, to make the experiment really complete, don't you have to have a teacher self-efficacy only group?
Teacher self-efficacy only group, yes, that ideally that will be included.
So you need autonomy supported teaching, yes, no, teacher self-efficacy, yes, no. So that's 4 groups rather than 3.
Yeah, that's why.
It may be beyond the scope, I'm not saying.
That's a good idea, but I think that in order to test teaching efficacy group, we need some context. So Danling is going to do is going to apply the teaching efficacy to the autonomy supportive teaching context. That's what she's going to do.
I got that, okay, you still don't have, you still can't say that the intervention is to one versus the other because they're confounded.
Yeah, yeah, because
There's no
also,
such thing as a self-efficacy group. I think Teresa found 8,000 claim to be, and there's a meta-analysis of
Self-efficacy in something.
Yeah, right.
So for example, self-efficacy in classroom management.
Right.
Context, so it has to have.
Okay. I'm going to another questions into study 1.
Yeah.
Could you go back to your hypothesis model?
Sec.
You give us would be the time.
that will be taking too long, so it's not working.
Which one?
Keep
Study
going.
1.
Yeah, study 1,
1/3.
Yeah,
where there's the figure.
go back.
Forward or back?
Oh, back.
Yeah. Go back.
I'll go back, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
keep going.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
so
Oh,
I think the research questions exactly as you want to see whether the increased self-efficacy have a contribution to improve like the outcome, the student outcome.
Yeah.
I wonder like in because that in the past like in purple and green, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure whether you really test the the change of self-efficacy have an effect on the outcome or not based on this serial model.
Yep.
Because you don't have a pass from time 1, self-efficacy on time 3, student outcome, right?
Yep.
Do we have the pass?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. That's why some path for statistical controls and correlations or some regressions are omitted just for better clarity. We do have the path from time 1 teacher self-efficacy and even time 1 autonomy supportive teaching to all the time 3 outcomes, and all the outcome baseline and time 2 scores are controlled. So
Good.
yeah, we
Yes, it's not clear in the technical as well.
Okay.
You didn't mention I wouldn't go in those time number and the baseline as a control.
okay, yeah, that's good to know. Thank you for spotting that.
Yeah, look to me, any question?
David, can I ask you for any questions, please?
You figure out how to unmute yourself or you
Yes, I'm actually talking now. That's good. Okay, so so first I just want to say I really enjoyed.
Sorry, David, bear with us.
Oh, can you not hear me?
You're breaking up.
It's breaking up. It's very.
Oh no. All right. Is it something
Can you
you're
just type?
adjusting?
Can you
Should I-
type? Can you type your question in the chat?
Oh.
Sorry.
Yes, okay.
I think it's pressing multiple time zones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The signal is
Maybe,
not strong.
meanwhile,
Yeah, meanwhile, while you're typing in, Dave, I'm just going to ask Keith to ask questions. Keith?
Excellent presentation, Danling. I thought our written document also was structured really well and very easy to read and, you know, if I wanted to find out X information, I knew exactly where to go to find that information, which is excellent. And well-structured presentation too. So 2 questions about your study one.
Yeah.
In the document, you had mentioned that there were differences between males and females. I think there's something else that was significant in terms of difference in a baseline. Did you have a look at whether there were differences on any of the T1 variables for across the 2 groups? So like, were there differences in gender, for instance, between the 2 groups?
Yeah, I did actually.
Yeah.
So gender did have significant influence on teacher self-efficacy, turned out. And I think we had male coded as 1 and female coded as 2, and the influence was negative, which means the male teachers had higher teacher self-efficacy at both time 1 and time 2. That's the result, the significant results. And also I looked into all the statistical control variables like grade level taught and whether they have special needs students in their class. And it turned out like whether they had special needs students in the class had a significant effect on time 1 job satisfaction, which makes sense probably. So that's all the significant results of baseline variables.
And were there differences between the intervention and control group? So we'll say, were there like more males in the first thing, like intervention in the first, like that?
I think,
I mean, like technically, because you randomized, they should be.
Yeah.
But I was just wondering, because they were significant, were there any differences?
Yeah. We did look into that, and there's no significant differences between groups. But if we can take a closer look at the final slides in the, sorry, might be clearer, but if I remember it right, there's no significant differences between intervention and control group. Yeah,
Right,
but thank you for.
Probably have to go back to the slide that you were on.
No, I didn't present those slides. I just had them in the back to just to answer them.
There you go. Oh, she's prepared.
Oh, yeah.
All right, there you go.
Oh, keep going. It's not this
Okay,
one.
go. All right. Tell me when to stop.
Keep going. There it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so, condition did have a significant difference on time 1 teacher self-efficacy. Yeah, that's worth looking. So that's why we always control for the pre-existing differences. And I think in the like interventions like this, it's probably like not always 100% you get completely equal groups in the randomized control trial. So, and that goes back to how obsessed me and my supervisors are with causal links. So if we want to know if they are causal, we have to control all the pre-existing differences, or we have randomized control trials. Even though we will have randomized control trials, we still have to control for the differences. Yeah.
And that sort of is related to the second question.
Yeah.
Because in the results model for that,
yeah,
the link between the intervention, or the path between the intervention and EST was about 0.2.
Yep.
But the path between the intervention and TSE was about 0.4.
Yeah.
And so did you first of all test that mediation? Because in my head, if you were doing an autonomy supportiveness intervention, that should increase their AST, which then would increase their teaching self-efficacy.
Yeah.
But with those links, clearly there's something else in addition to AST that would be impacting on teacher self-efficacy.
Yeah, I would certainly think so. Even though I don't think we tested with this data set, but in other data sets, autonomy supportive teaching practice, after the intervention did increase time 3 teacher self-efficacy. And also we can see the shadow in this model as well, because time 1 autonomy supportive teaching did increase time 2 teacher self-efficacy. So we can see the links in there. Yeah, that's. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll just put on David's comments now. I'll read these up because I need to for recordings. So David said, I really enjoyed about your work, and I think you've done an excellent job of finding what I think is the most crucial gap in the literature. Most teaching self-efficacy studies open with a description of all the great things that are associated with. So there's a glaring causal assumption that really gets at the cash value of the construct, and we desperately need to test that causal assumption. I had a number of methodology questions and also minor things. I said those later after the meeting. For now, he has 2 questions. So the first one is, in your description of how you measured achievement, you stated that you used objective PE scores or objective student achievement scores provided by teachers. Can you explain what that score represents and how they were provided to you? And then we'll go with the next question.
Yeah, thanks, David. So the student achievement scores were the objective scores they achieved like at 3 time points. So like the school had the schools had the students' scores, or the teachers had the students' scores, and then we collected all the students' scores and then averaged them based on the class the teacher was in. That's how we got the final score final student achievement score for each teacher.
So his question is, can we be fairly certain these scores reflect learning rather than something else, like teachers being more lenient or students behaving better? Perhaps they are more autonomously motivated.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. So since this is a PE subject, and I don't really know how the final score of each student were obtained, like whether they had to demonstrate how fast they could run or, yeah, okay. So that's the actual student performance in PE subjects. But whether it's related to student autonomous learning, I think that's why people care about student achievement or student performance. If you can perform well or achieve well, it's mostly because you are autonomously motivated, and it has been demonstrated in the research of motivation, student motivation. So more autonomous motivation leads to higher student performance and achievement.
In Korean education context, in P class we have 2 different components to evaluate the student's achievement. One is the actual performance, and the other one is the also learning, practical learning, like some health or some achievement, etc.
Yeah.
Both are
Theory and performance,
theory
yeah,
and
knowledge and
performance.
performance.
What David, I suppose, is asking in the South Korean context, because South Korea would be a lot of Asian countries, it's a collectivist culture.
Yeah.
So would there be any difference, would you consider, from a collectivist culture from another type of culture, non-collectivist?
Yeah, I definitely do. Just like people always question whether teachers can be autonomy supportive in China or other Asian countries, it's the same for any motivational construct. So that's why this study needs to be continuously replicated in different cultures, so to see if we can achieve the same results. If we can, that means like teacher self-efficacy or autonomy supportive teaching doesn't vary between cultures, or they have the same functions or influences in any culture. So that will be great to see, or interesting to see. Yeah.
Very good. So David's next question is about the measurement of self-efficacy. The short form of teacher sense of efficacy scale has 12 items to capture classroom management, instructional strategies, and student engagement. You ended up using 3 items for student engagement, and I would like to understand why that would be particularly relevant to something with the self-determination theory. But could you talk a little about why you didn't measure self-efficacy in the classroom management and for instructional strategies? It seems like teachers gain specific strategies. You refer to them as skills or practices during this intervention. So wouldn't we expect to gains in self-efficacy for instructional strategies as a result of their participation?
Yeah. Thanks, David. I think I used to have the same question as you did when I first look at the the 8 strategies, behavior strategies of autonomy supportive teaching and instructional strategies, subscales of teacher self-efficacy. But the reason we focused on student achievement was that first, the purpose of autonomy supportive teaching was to support student motivation through engaging the students. So that was the main purpose of the practice. And second, I know it involves like 7 instructional strategies in the skills of autonomy supportive teaching. But if you look at the items of teacher self-efficacy for instructional strategies, it actually focuses more on like whether you have alternative instructionals or instructions for the students. Like if you can't explain this in this strategy, can you explain it in another strategy? So it's more like the diversity or the flexibility of the instructions instead of focusing on engaging students or supporting their motivation. That's why we didn't measure that aspect. And we want to be more like specific or task specific as we can based on what available scales we have. So yeah, based on the available scales, we think the 3 items of the student engagement subscale measures or aligns best with the autonomy supportive teaching based on self-determination theory. I don't know if I got that right.
Is that all right, David? Well, we've touched the response. Yeah, it says thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, tick that box. Any questions from the audience here? Anybody from online as well?
Oh, yeah.
A couple issues. One of the things is that in relation to Teresa's question, you did look at whether the demographic variables moderated the intervention.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And so that's some control, even though there were initial differences. The next issue is this issue about why the teacher's self-efficacy effects were so large. And I know the teacher self-efficacy wasn't exactly aligned with the autonomy supportive teaching, but it sort of is. I mean, it's looking at a component of it. And the fact that my self-beliefs might change more than the reality isn't necessarily inconsistent with a Bender perspective. So Bender, and particularly in subsequent studies where you get teacher self-efficacy, it's even more closely aligned to the actual intervention. It may well be that you continue to get teacher self-efficacy effects that are actually bigger than the autonomous supportive teaching effects. So people's beliefs and their ability to do something may be better than what their actual practices are.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's aligning with the results here, but also like it's also aligning with what we say about overestimating your self-efficacy. And it turns out, like I think there has been research saying a little bit of overestimation in your self-efficacy is good for your performance and outcomes and things. So yeah, I agree.
One of the tricky bits that you've got, you highlighted the issue of causality.
Yeah.
It's a really tricky one. You're probably going to have to flesh that out a little bit.
Right.
I'm not sure that your study 1 says anything about the causality of teacher self-efficacy.
No.
And I mean, obviously, it's clear that it's a mediator.
Yeah.
But you didn't manipulate teacher self-efficacy. And so you've got this circle that says teacher self-efficacy, but you don't really know that that's what it is.
Yeah.
It might be something related to, say, the same way that it's still kind of quasi-correlational.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I agree. And I'm hoping to get that somehow sorted in study 3 and maybe further future studies. Because one study is not enough to like tackle all the remaining problems in the literature of teacher self-efficacy. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Yes, Nick.
I tag on to that because I'm struggling, it's probably just because I think, I'm struggling to sort of disentangle the fact that what you have in autonomy supported teaching is a skill intervention. You're looking at self-efficacy. So in your, the AST intervention increases the skill of the use of autonomy supported teaching.
Yeah.
And as a result, teachers' self-efficacy for autonomy supported teaching goes up.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's no way that you could disentangle those two things. Like your study 3, for example, to kind of get it right, everybody's building that. Your experimental groups need to have one group that increases the skill of autonomy supported teaching, but not the self-efficacy. And a group that increases the self-efficacy for autonomy supported teaching, but not the skill. I don't know how you could do that. Like I just like I'm sort of wondering if I missed something.
Yeah.
Or if those two variables are so deeply entangled that it perhaps only really matters that you increase the skill and the self-efficacy will naturally follow. Like is the self-efficacy the thing that really matters? Or do you need interventions that just increase the skill?
Yeah, that's a very good question, I think, because that's also why a lot of people think like we just need to increase the skills in teacher interventions. You don't need to care about teacher self-efficacy. It's just a byproduct. And that was also one of the reasons I did study 1 to establish its predictive power, or whether it is an independent construct that predicts the outcomes and in the manipulation.
Just on that, I definitely think that you could have an intervention that increases skill, that also does a better job of integrating self-efficacy into that skill. Like I think that is a thing that exists.
Yeah.
And probably if self-efficacy is independent of achievement, it's worth investing. It's just it's a difficult thing to experimentally, like how do you manipulate someone's skill that still make them feel like they're rubbish at it, just because like that they feel used to be practical.
Yeah, that's why I'm still struggling with the design of study 3 or the actual practice of study 3, because as you probably have seen in the figure of the meta-analysis, skill development is the number 1 of all the studies. A lot of interventions focus on skill development, and like even though we categorize it as skill development, I think they still involve some elements of teacher self-efficacy in there, as you said. So like autonomy supportive teaching intervention, I'm sure they manipulated some factors related to teacher self-efficacy, like practice, like whether you practice the skills, whether it's a mastery experience or not. But at this point, I can't say for sure whether I can like neatly separate the two, but I'm hoping after like we get the results of study 2, or even before we get the results of study 2, I can finalize the categorization to see if actually the sources or the factors for teacher self-efficacy are something different and independent from what teachers do in the teacher interventions. Yeah, but thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
We're just mark of the time, so I'm just going to allow David, who's online, the last question, since he is in the East. Thanks for his time for being late.
Yeah, that's true.
So look, he says, I felt that the lit review reflected a really nuanced understanding of where things stand and where they need to go. One area I think you could expand on is your description of the mechanisms through which a autonomous supportive teaching intervention could enhance teacher self-efficacy.
Yeah.
I think this is especially important because you are marrying 2 different theoretical frameworks. Can you explain how this works from a social cognitive perspective, which sources are at play? You describe the intervention itself as a source, but what are the sources? They're sources of information, things we learn about our capabilities from trying it ourselves. Those are inactive experience from observing others, the current experiences, from messages received from each other's social persuasions, and then from how we feel when we're engaged in this task. So the question is, How do they gain efficacy relevant information from this intervention? You made a quick references to modelling, for example, seeing strategies modelled either in person or through videos, which is vicarious experience. What are the elements of these sessions and discussions that would make someone feel more capable as a teacher? That is, if the intervention influences self-efficacy, why does it do so?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, like we said, there might be some factors in the intervention that has a high relation to the sources of teacher self-efficacy. So in the autonomy supportive teaching intervention, the first part was theory-based. Teachers learned the knowledge about self-efficacy. Oh, no, sorry, about autonomy supportive teaching. And then the second part, they got to practice the skills or the strategies they learned in the intervention. But I wouldn't personally call practicing mastery experience. To make it mastery, the teachers have to be feeling successful in doing this. So even if they were practicing in the intervention, it's not actually mastery experience if they didn't say so or they didn't feel so. And the third part, they got together to discuss what they have tried in their classrooms and what worked and what did not work, and they came up with like a better solution in their own discussions. So I guess since the intervention lasted through across the whole school year, the teachers get to see how it's done, and they get to try it themselves, and then they get together and reflect on their experiences, and that's how the autonomy supportive teaching practice actually stuck into their practice or into their mind. It takes time, and it's not just in an intervention and then there you go, you got the skills, and then your teacher self-efficacy goes up. That's why all the autonomy supportive teaching interventions tend to have a follow-up. And we want to see in the long term whether teachers' learned skills are still there and whether their belief actually varies after the intervention and after their practice in the classroom. So I don't know. Sorry for that answer.
Thank you very much for cognizant of the time. So any other questions, save it for Danling's final year review.
Thank you. Yes, right. Before you know it, it's there.
So can you please give us a final round of applause for Danling? Thank you. So I'll ask her review panel to convene in the boardroom. David, if you could stay online, I'm going to transfer you over to the boardroom for the discussion. Thank you. Thank you.
We're looking at